Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, welcome. So glad to have you. Guys, I don't normally say this, I know, but I'm going to in this video. If you have been watching some of my videos and you haven't subscribed yet and hit that little notification bell, please go ahead and do that now. That way you don't miss a video whenever I upload. Give this video a like if you like it or a dislike if you don't. Either way, I'm glad you're here. So today we are going to talk about propagations. I'm going to share with you my different propagation methods, different things that I use, different routes that I go when it comes to chopping up my plants or chopping babies off my plants and trying to root them and form new plants. I'm gonna show you guys some of the propagations that I have going now, both in water and spag, show you kind of like their progress. And we're also gonna take a couple new cuttings off of a couple more plants and go ahead and get them situated in either water or moss. And then we can do updates in the future and we can check in with these plants that I propagate today. We're just gonna be basically looking at a bunch of different plants and a bunch of different plant babies. Anyway, what shall we grab first? I guess first, let's talk about a philodendron, shall we? So this is my philodendron bipennifolium, also known as the horsehead philodendron. This poor babe sets by my alocasias, so it has had spider mites several times. It's been a whole mess. But I actually chopped him up a couple of months ago because of the way he was growing. He was growing really funky. Like, here's where I chopped him at. Like the stem went up and then it went straight down. It was really strange. He is pushing off some new growth right here. So he's pushed off a new growth point. This was his newest leaf here. But I'm going to show you his babies that I took off of him. I'm attempting to propagate one of them in water and one of them in sphagnum moss. People have asked me if I prefer to root my plants in water or sphagnum moss. It honestly depends on the plant. I do enjoy using water because obviously you can see the roots forming, but I have found with so many of my plants, and this could, I'm sure probably does have a lot to do with where I live, my climate, environment, temperatures, everything like that. But for me, I find that philodendrons are the main plant that I'm propagating the most. And for me, philodendrons do the best, they root the best, and they root the quickest in sphagnum moss every time. Every time. So I'm just going to kind of give you a little comparison. Both of these plants are babies from my bipennifolium. One of them has been in water for about 2 months and one of them has been in sphagnum moss for about 2 months. So let's go ahead and see what kind of progress we have going on. So let's look at the water first. I also have something else in here which I'll show you in just a minute. This was the part of the plant that was growing super funky, growing straight down, and I just couldn't take it anymore, so I cut it off. And I just kind of plopped it in the water. I am changing the water regularly, about once or twice a week. If not, it gets kind of mucky and disgusting, and it can rot your plant. It can cause bacteria and rot to form on the stem. So if we take a look here at the nodes, you can see there's absolutely no root growth. No root growth whatsoever. I don't even really see signs of roots, and that's a pretty hefty node right there. So it's kind of shocking to me that there's no roots on this yet. But yeah, no roots whatsoever. So now let's look at the bipennifolium that's in sphagnum moss. So this was the top cutting, and this is the cutting that I put in moss. Look at him. This one is so cute. I absolutely love this one. So this is his newest leaf here. This teeny tiny little baby leaf here, and then we have a new growth point there. I just have it in this little plastic Tupperware container, and if we look right here, do you guys see that? So that is a root. This has been in the moss the same amount of time his brother has been in the water, and there's roots all over the container. And the cool thing also, people say they don't like to use moss because you can't see the roots forming, but honestly with philodendrons especially, they start to root in moss super fast, and you can see the roots because they grow so fast and so crazy that you will see them around the sides of the container if you're using a clear container, that is. So I'm gonna go ahead and pull this guy out because I haven't pulled him out since I put him in here, just to check and see what the roots actually look like. He's pretty snug in here. So that's also another way you can tell if the plant has formed roots in the sphagnum moss. If you tug on the plant and it's snug in the moss, then you know that it's probably rooted down in. So look at this, guys. Look at this, okay? Holy cow. It looks like Right here is the longest root. I know it's kind of hard to tell because of all the moss stuck on the roots, but that's the longest root. So it's safe to say, I mean, there's roots coming up right here. You can see the roots here and here. There's roots everywhere. It's very, very well rooted in the moss. And yeah, as I said, it's been in the moss for the same amount of time that his brother's been in the water and hasn't produced even the first sign of roots forming. So I could technically pot this guy up, but I'm not going to right now. I'm just going to leave him because he's doing really well. Here's another philodendron. This is my Philodendron Jose Bueno. As I've mentioned 100 times, I have chopped several of my prized plants and sold either cuttings or the base of the plant and kept the larger cutting for myself to buy other wishlist plants that I really wanted. So I did in fact chop my Jose Bueno. I think he had 3 or 4 leaves that I sold with the roots of the plant, and this was the cutting I took for myself. That's been about a month or so ago. So I put him, look how beautiful he is. I put him in this little glass container of moss, and I'm not gonna pull him out right now because I just don't want to disturb him because he hasn't been in here that long. But I'm gonna show you guys. You guys see that? That right there is a beautiful healthy root poking up out of the moss. There's also another one you can barely see coming in right here. So this has been in moss, like I said, maybe a month, month and a half, something like that, and he's already rooted up very nicely. I haven't lost a single leaf since putting him in here. Amazing. Everybody is going to be different. What works for me might not work for you. Everyone's going to have their preferences, so I am in no way stating that the way that I choose to, you know, handle my propagations, the methods that I use is the right way and any other way is the wrong way. I'm just sharing with you what has worked best for me and why I choose the methods that I do. For philodendrons, almost every time I put them in moss. I did take a cutting of my pink princess philodendron, which isn't looking the hottest right now at all. So I took her beautiful half moon cutting. I took 2 cuttings. The first one had 2 half moons. I sold that one. And then I took another cutting because I just wanted to start another plant for myself because I don't love the bottom of this plant that much. And it has a half moon leaf as well. And I've had it in water for about 6 weeks and it has no roots whatsoever. No sign of roots at all. So I actually have it in my prop box in some perlite, moist perlite. So I'm trying that. I've not tried to root anything with perlite yet, but I know a lot of people have been raving about it. So I will keep you guys updated on how that goes and if I have any success with it. But yeah, I have that and a Syngonium chiapense cutting that I'm sending to a friend when it roots in perlite. Okay, so here's my Philodendron billeti that I love with all of my heart. I killed this plant, guys. I lost his last leaf and I checked his roots and guess what? I overwatered and I had rotted his roots completely away. I had to remove them all. It was so sad. Over the summer, I put him in moss and tried to reroot him. He was just a little stump. It was the saddest thing ever. Lo and behold, he is completely rooted up. I'm gonna try to show you guys. You can't really see. You can't really see, but there's roots everywhere. I'll try to get some like close-up footage. So like here's a root. I mean, this jar is just full of roots. Shortly after I put him in the moss, he was pushing out a new leaf. This is his first leaf that he put off for me after I killed him back and he had no leaf. Isn't it so pretty? And then recently he put off this leaf. As we can see, he's still technically unfurling this leaf, but isn't he beautiful? And then we have another growth point. We have another growth point coming in right here. And yeah, he's lived in moss this entire time. So for philodendrons, guys, I absolutely rave about it. Sphagnum moss is the way to go 100% for me. Personally, I love it. Okay, now let's go back to water propagating. So in here with this guy, I have some sticks, right? And you can maybe see there's some roots down in the bottom of the jar. This is just a pickle jar, guys. I keep these pickle jars, olive jars, baby food jars. I keep everything like that to root my plants in, root my cuttings in. Anyways, okay. So I have mentioned before that my Syngonium albo that I loved so much, it was like 4 to 6 foot long. It was so long, guys. Got infested really bad with spider mites and it took out all of the leaves, all of them. So I cut this guy down to right here and I chopped at every node. And I put a few of them in a Ziploc bag of sphagnum moss, which I will show you. but I put a couple of the longer stems in water. This was about maybe like, I don't know, 4 to 6 weeks ago once again. What did I do with that? Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and pull these guys out and show you what's going on here. Remember, there was no leaves whatsoever. No leaves left whatsoever. I had to remove all of them. They were all yellow and completely gone. So this long stem here, there's no roots on. You can see the little aerial roots there on that bottom node have kind of perked up a little bit, but there's really no root growth, which is perfectly fine. I mean, you're not going to be successful with every single propagation, which is also a reason why I like to take multiple propagations and put some in water, some in moss, so there's a higher chance of at least one of them rooting and giving you another plant. If we look at this one, however, this one has rooted. Look at those beautiful healthy roots, and it's actually pushed off 2 leaves. So this was the first one. They're obviously super tiny, but they're really adorable. This is a good sign, and here's the newest leaf that's unfurling. So I was like, oh no, I've completely lost my elbow. Ta-da! One of them has rooted and is growing, and I'm just like ecstatic about it. So I think what I've decided is that I'm going to chop this one up as well and put it in sphagnum moss and see how it does. Because I don't think it's going to do anything in this water. You just never know. Honestly, I've had really great success with syngoniums and water propagating. I find that they typically root pretty well and pretty fast in water. I don't think I've actually ever rooted a syngonium in sphagnum moss. I just haven't tried it until now. So, as I mentioned, I cut at all of the nodes. So let's go ahead and pull out these little syngonium elbow nodes and see if anything is happening. Okay, so here is the first one. It doesn't have any roots growing yet. You can see that node right there. It doesn't have any roots growing yet, but it does have this, it'll focus. It does have this new cute little leaf. So that is a really good sign. So no roots yet, but it does have a new leaf. So that tells me that it's doing something. It's not dying, so that's a good thing. That is a good sign. I'm not sure how many I actually put down in here. So here's another one. And again, no actual roots. But if you look right here beside the node, if you would focus, if you look right here beside the node, there's actually a little growth point coming in, which will probably be a new leaf. So again, no roots just yet, but we do have a growth point. So definitely a good sign once again. Okay, we have a root. Wow, okay, we have a root and a growth point. So here's another one, and if we look right here, we do have a new root that's came in. Very, very exciting. And then on this side, we have a new growth point, which will be a leaf. Amazing, so excited. So in the case of my syngonium albo, my propagations have definitely rooted quicker in the water versus the moss, but they are still doing things. They are still doing something in the moss, so this is a good sign. Now I think that's all of them that I have in this bag, but I could be wrong. So I'm just gonna put them back in there. When I put them in the moss, I just kind of lay them on top of it, and I throw a little bit of moss over top of the node, blow some air into the bag, that humidity pumping, and voila. Set them under my grow light, good to go. I've got a mess here with sphagnum moss, but let's go ahead and take some new propagation. This here, whoa, this is my Begonia immaculata. She tall, okay? She's leggy as crap. I actually already took one cutting from her a couple days ago, and I was like, wait, I think I want to do a video on propagation, so I'm gonna wait and film the rest of it. So I didn't cut any more off, but I've decided to trim this girl down because, as we can see, she's just so leggy. Her bottom half is so bare. I love how tall she's gotten, but I don't like how leggy and bare the bottom part of the plant is. So I've decided to chop her down. Also, I've had some issues with crisping on the leaves and things like that. So I kind of just want to start a couple new plants off of this entirely because I do love the immaculata. The new leaves are fine, but it's like, I don't know, it's just not the prettiest plant right now. So we're gonna go ahead and cut this girl down a little bit and place her in some water. And I'm gonna show you a couple begonias that I have actually propagated already in water, and they're now full plants. I'm trying to figure out how to do this. So she has a couple new stalks that have came in down here at the base of the pot. I'm not going to mess with those. I'm going to leave those and let it be its own plant. So I'm just going to cut these long ones, these crazy ones. So here's the one that I cut a couple days ago. It's a really beautiful cutting, actually. These leaves are all fairly healthy. They look pretty good. Believe it or not, it's only been in there maybe 3 days. I don't think you guys are going to be able to see, but there's already some teeny tiny little starter roots poking off of the stem, off of the node down there. So very cool. I don't think I've ever tried to root a begonia in sphagnum moss with a stem cutting. With a leaf cutting, that's completely different. If you are forming a new plant from a leaf cutting, a leaf propagation, I always put that in moss. Whenever it comes to actual stem cuttings with nodes, I put those in water. And begonias, in my experience, root up super, super fast, guys, in water. They root up super fast. I'm gonna cut her right there. Oh my gosh, look at this, guys. Insane. Holy cow. Kind of breaks my heart to do this because she's grown so tall, but it's better for her health and my sanity. This is just kind of part of owning begonias, particularly cane begonias. It's just something that happens. They do eventually get tall and leggy, and if you want to keep them more compact and full and lush, then you need to cut them back, prune them. It's actually really fun. Begonia propagating is really fun for me. I don't know. First of all, I'm going to cut off this bottom half because it's unnecessary. And I'm going to remove this ugly lower leaf. I might actually remove another node. I kind of want to leave a couple of nodes just so there's more chance for roots to come in. That looks pretty good. Yeah, it's kind of long, but the leaves are all pretty close together. So this one, it's a longer cutting, but it's okay. And I'm going to try to fit this in this little vase with his sister. Okay, so just making sure the nodes are submerged underwater entirely. We're gonna have 2 new immaculatas if all goes well. Now I'm gonna show you guys some begonia propagations that I've already taken and that have already been rooting. Okay, I thought that I had another begonia with lots of roots in water still, but it turns out I already potted her up and I forgot about it. So I have one here that is still in water, just starting to root, and then I have one that's already very well rooted and potted up. So this is off of my begonia. Which one is this? Oh my gosh. This is my begonia medora. So I took a cutting from her. I put this in here maybe 2 weeks ago or so. Well, here's the top part. As we can see, the bottom's a little bit scraggly, but hopefully she'll put in some new leaves on the bottom part of this. My intention is just to root this and maybe a couple more pieces and fill in the pot a little bit because she was getting a little bit leggy as well. But if we look right here, she is rooting pretty nicely already. Honestly, for cane begonias, within a week of being in water, typically they start to push out roots. I mean, they root very fast. So yeah, there we have it. Begonia medora is rooting in her little water vessel. This is gross. There's a dead leaf or 2 in here that really needs taken out. So I need to change this water. And then this looks very similar to my medora, but this is actually Begonia My Special Angel, and I took this cutting a couple months ago, put it in water, and guys, I'm telling you, it had the glass vessel completely filled with roots within 2 weeks. Like, it was crazy. And instead of putting this one back in the pot with the mother plant, I just decided to pot it up by itself for now and have kind of like a separate little plant, a second little plant, because I do love this one. Very cute. I wish I could show you the roots on this, but I really don't want to pull her out because I've just potted her up recently and I just don't want to disturb the roots. But begonias, I definitely go the water route when it comes to rooting them, and I've had great success with that. You could definitely try sphagnum moss. Okay, I lied. I do actually have a begonia in moss at the moment. So my begonia jula was doing amazing, fabulous, guys, and I forgot to water her, and let's just say it was not pretty. She had gotten super tall, super beautiful, lots of new leaves. Well, all of her leaves have crisped up except for a couple. Like, it's really sad. So that was completely my mistake, and that's what happens when you don't keep up with watering your more sensitive begonias. So I took a cutting off of her and I actually placed it in this little moss terrarium situation where I have a couple other begonia leaves propagating, but I took this by the stem. So this will be my first time experimenting with rooting a begonia in sphagnum moss, aside from a leaf propagation. We'll see how she does. Hopefully she survives and does well. I do still have the rest of the plant. It's fine, it's just not the prettiest, and it doesn't have really any foliage to look at right now. This is, I think this is Begonia lucerne. Look how beautiful she is. This begonia is absolutely gorgeous. One of my favorite cane types. So I had one of these a couple years ago and I ended up killing it whenever I actually cut it to try and propagate it because it was leggy. Rachel sent me this. We sent each other a package. I think it was this past spring, and she sent me the most adorable little, I think it was a 2-leaf cutting, and it had a little growth point of her Begonia lucerne. So I popped her in water and she rooted up very fast, started growing, pushing out new leaves in the water, and then I potted her up a couple months ago. So this is one of her older leaves here. You can see like on these darker, more red colored leaves, these were the leaves that were underneath my purple Growlights back there. And then now she's too tall, so the top foliage here is not actually, it doesn't actually fit under the shelf to get any of the grow light action. She's setting with her top part kind of hanging over the edge. She still gets really good light, but you can just kind of see the difference there that lighting really can make on a plant. Crazy, just look at that. I love her. Yeah, and this was a very successful water propagation as well. Okay guys, so let's go ahead and take a cutting. This is my giant Pearl Marks variegated. He is so crazy and full, and yeah, he's just growing like mad. I'd like to take a couple cuttings and have a couple smaller plants. I'm just kind of hoping that maybe it might encourage some more of the variegation to come out on the new leaves. I think I'm gonna cut below this node right here and take this cutting. Okay, so here is one adorable little cutting. We have some growth points on there and we have a good node. Actually, we have 2. Okay, the next one I'm going to take is this funky one right here. This top cutting right here. Yep. Oh my gosh, I'm trying to do this one-handed, so this is fun. And here's the second cutting. Beautiful. Also with 2 leaves and several little growth points. Let's go ahead and get these guys into some moss. Maybe I should do one of them in sphagnum moss and one of them in the perlite, the damped perlite, because that's kind of like a new experiment for me. I have my dampened sphagnum moss here. I'm going to be placing this guy in this cup, I think. So yeah, let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to put a little bit of sphagnum moss in the bottom. I probably shouldn't have candles setting this close to my plants. So now I'm just going to grab a handful of the moss. I'm going to wring it to make sure there's no, oh yeah, we've got some extra water in there. Squeeze out all that extra water, and I'm going to place the moss straight around the nodes of the plant on the stem. So I'm going to cover the nodes entirely with the moss, like so, and then I'm going to stick this moss ball into the cup, like that. Not pressing it down too tightly. I'll press it a little bit just to make it, you know, make sure it's firm and sturdy in the container, but I'm not going to forcefully press the moss down too much because you want there to be kind of like little air pockets in the moss. That way that the plant can get oxygen down into where the roots are going to be forming. You need oxygen for roots to form, and just to be sure that no rot or anything like that occurs, it's just a wee bit more moss around the top of this here. He is done. Okay guys, I have some perlite here in this little bowl. And then I've placed a little bit in the bottom of this little baby food jar, and I am going to attempt to stick this guy in the perlite, and then I'm going to moisten it with my spray bottle. We're going to go ahead and stick him down into the jar, and I'm just going to probably make a huge mess, but add the perlite into the jar. I am making a mess. I'm gonna hold it over this because if I spill it, then it's fine. Okay, I think that's good. Here he is. That was so messy, but it's fine. The nodes are covered in the perlite, and now I'm just gonna take my spray bottle. I think I called this a squirt bottle in my spider mite video, and I was so embarrassed. Like, it's not a squirt bottle, it's a spray bottle, but you know, it's fine. So I'm just gonna kind of, I guess, dampen this like I would sphagnum moss. I'm not gonna saturate it. The perlite is very absorbent, so it will suck up and absorb the water all the way down through, I'm assuming. We will check back in a couple months on both of these little burl marks and see how they do. See which one roots up the quickest. And we'll also check back on the mother plant and see if she decides to push out any more variegated leaf. When you ask what's my favorite way to propagate and root plants, I'm gonna have to say, for the most part, for my more like prized plants, my more sensitive plants, like philodendrons, even anthuriums, monsteras, that's another one I can show you. For things like that, it's definitely gonna have to be sphagnum moss. This is another great example. This is a plant you would have seen me unbox a couple months ago. I was so excited. I did a plant trade and got my first albo. It is a top cutting, and I actually pulled this out a couple weeks ago, guys. If you follow me on Instagram, I share a lot of stuff there, a lot of plant updates and stuff like that, but I pulled him out and he has rooted up super well, like to the point where he could actually be potted in soil now and be good. Like, I'm still leaving him in the sphagnum moss in my humidity box until I see new growth. So until he pushes off his first new leaf in my care, I'm gonna leave him in the moss. But look here, look at this. So similar to philodendron, my monsteras, they root very fast and very well in sphagnum moss as well. I mean, it's a fully established plant now. I can't believe it. And now I'm just waiting ever so patiently for the first sign of a new leaf to come up, because I'm gonna lose it. Like, I am gonna lose my crap when this plant pushes off a new leaf. But yeah, sphagnum moss, guys, it's amazing. I love it. So many times I will place a plant, particularly philodendron, in water. For whatever reason, they start to rot. They get gooey and nasty and the stem will start to rot. Either that or they do absolutely nothing. They might lose their leaves, but there's no roots. And I'm like, okay, scratch this. I'm putting it in moss. I'll take it out, I'll wash the stem, I'll put it in moss, and voila, it roots up and it does really well. So for some things like begonias, syngoniums, those do really well for me in water, but for philodendrons, monsteras, things like that, moss all the way for me. Hoyas, sphagnum moss. Okay, this is rooted down in there completely. Okay guys, so it's dark outside, so I'm sorry about the lighting, but let's go ahead and just, I don't know, go into my plant room and look at some stuff, I guess. I just kind of have stuff everywhere. This is why whenever I get spider mites, it spreads so rapidly and so quickly. There's a lot of plants that aren't looking the best, I'm gonna be honest, because of spider mites. So yeah, this right here is a propagation. So I, believe it or not, cut my giant pastazanum, which I think you guys probably seen me pot this guy up. I haven't pulled him out to check on him, but he is in moss. So whenever I have plants rooting in moss, people ask me like, how do you water and things like that without like overwatering and rotting the plant? Guys, I literally just keep the moss moist. I keep it damp. So whenever I water, sometimes I'll just take my mister bottle, which is right here, my water bottle, especially if it's a smaller pot, a smaller plant, I'll just mist the top of the sphagnum moss and let it drain down in and kind of dampen it. I never make the moss wet enough to where if I were to squeeze it, it would wring water out of it. If it's that wet, then it's too wet. This varicosum, Philodendron varicosum, beautiful. She's pushing off a new leaf here. If you remember, she was just a stick. Guess what? She is fully rooted in her moss in there, looking cute as ever. Look at her. So cute. I also have this beautiful philodendron. I always get the number name mixed up. It's like 69866 or something like that. I have him in here in this little baby food jar in moss rooting. He's fully rooted as well, and he actually just pushed off this new leaf, which I am so over the moon about. Like, I am such a fan of this plant, guys. I love it. I did not know I would love it as much as I do before Carolina sent it to me. But yeah, it pushed off this new growth point from the base of the stem under the moss. Obviously, that leaf is really juvenile. But it's still adorable. There's another leaf coming in right there. So, I mean, honestly, guys, not only do my philodendrons just root really incredibly well in the moss, but they live and grow in the moss. very, very well. They thrive. They thrive in the moss. And that's why even after they've rooted, I tend to leave them in the moss for a good while until they've put off a good bit of new growth, because they just love it so much and they just do so well that I don't know. I don't see the point in disturbing them when they're so happy. Here is a Hoya that has done extremely well in moss. Put it in, and as you can see, there's literally roots coming up out of the pot. There's roots coming out of the drainage holes of this orchid pot. I mean, there's just roots everywhere in this little pot. It only had a couple leaves. This was a tiny cutting when Alex sent it to me in our swap. This Hoya could definitely be potted up, like, but I mean, why mess with it whenever it's so happy? I absolutely am in love with the Hoya Australis Lisa. Like, oh my gosh, this is just one of those plants that was on my wish list for so long, and now that I have it, I love it and admire it all the time. All the time. We get it, Samantha. You like sphagnum moss. We know, girl. We also have my melanochrysum, whom I got from the same plant mommy that I got the varicosum from. Yeah, I just put this in moss when I got it probably a week and a half ago-ish. So I have no idea if it's started to root yet. I'm not going to pull it out or check for at least a month. But it's beautiful, and I have no doubts that this melanochrysum is going to root up and do amazing, just like the varicosum. But this is my Hoya surrigioensis. This is a cutting that I took off of her. It's been in here for probably 2 months now, maybe-ish, and it's in moss. Looky there, roots coming out the bottom. I mean, it's just crazy. You put a Hoya or a Philodendron in sphagnum moss, and they just root so well and so fast. Hey guys, I think that's pretty much gonna do it for this video. I just wanted to share with y'all some of my favorite propagation methods and how they have worked out for me with certain plants. Yeah, so this isn't really a super informative video or anything like that. Just a fun one. Just kind of sharing with you my experiences, but if you like this video, be sure and give it a thumbs up. And if you didn't, you can go ahead and give it a thumbs down as well. I do have a couple of y'all that just love to go through giving every single video a thumbs down as soon as I post it. So that's fine, guys. That still helps me with the algorithm. So I appreciate you either way. But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this. I will see you soon in my next video. Feel free to share in the comments with me and everyone else your favorite ways to propagate your plant babies. I'll see you guys in my next one. I love y'all. You're the best. Bye, guys.